There is a number sitting inside the tax code, and that number is $44,000. It has not moved since 1993. Not for inflation, not for wages, not for the price of eggs. A married couple crosses that frozen line, and suddenly up to 85% of their Social Security benefit becomes taxable income. They did not get a raise. They did not win anything. A rule written when a gallon of gas cost $1 just reached out and taxed them. Anyway, that is the whole story in one sentence. A line drawn decades ago never moved, and the world moved past it. And now it quietly taxes people who thought they had already paid their dues. You probably have never heard the phrase provisional income. That is by design. It is the least discussed number in your entire retirement, and it decides how much of your Social Security check the government keeps. Most retirees find out about it the year it happens to them. They file a return, the software spits out a bigger number than expected, and nobody ever explained why. The cost of not understanding this is not small. It can mean thousands of dollars a year, every year for the rest of your life. It can push you into a higher effective tax rate at the exact moment you have the least income to fight back with. And here's the part that stings. It is completely predictable. You can see it coming years in advance if you know where to. Look, the people who plan around it keep money, the people who ignore it hand over. Same benefit, same rules, wildly different outcome. So stay with me to the end. I am going to show you the formula, the frozen thresholds, and the trap hidden inside them. Then I will show you what you can actually do about it. The last piece ties the whole thing together, and it changes how you think about every number. In the tax code, it is worth the wait. Let's be honest about how this works, because the mechanics are simpler than they sound. The IRS does not look at your Social Security benefit alone. It builds a special number just for this test, and that number is called provisional income. The formula is this. You take your adjusted gross income. You add any tax-exempt interest, the kind from municipal bonds that you thought was safe. Then you add 1/2 of your Social Security benefits. Add those three pieces together, and you have your provisional income. That is the number on trial, not your benefit, not your salary. This custom figure built from parts of your financial life. Think about that for a second. The tax-exempt bond you bought precisely to avoid taxes still counts here. It does not add to your regular taxable income, but it walks right into the provisional income formula and helps push you over the line. It is a side door most people never knew existed. Now for the thresholds, and this is where the $25,000, the $34,000, the $32,000, and the $44,000 come in. If you file single, the first line is $25,000. Below that, none of your benefit is taxed. Between $25,000 and $34,000, up to 50% of your benefit becomes taxable. Above $34,000, up to 85% of it becomes taxable. Those are the single tiers, 3 simple bands, 0, 50, 85. For a married couple filing jointly, the lines shift, but not by much. The first threshold is $32,000. Below that, your benefits are untaxed. Between $32,000 and $44,000, up to half of your benefit is taxable. Above $44,000, up to 85% of it is taxable. That is the famous $44,000 rule. It sounds like a comfortable number until you remember it counts. Half your Social Security plus everything else you earn, a modest pension and a part-time job can. Clear it before lunch. Picture 2 switches on a wall. The first switch flips at the lower line and turns on the 50% tier. The second switch flips at the higher line and turns on the 85% tier. Once both are on, most of your benefit is exposed. And crossing a line by a single dollar can flip the switch. The tax code does not care that you barely stepped over. A tripwire does not care how gently you touched it. Run a quick example so the numbers feel real. A single retiree with a $30,000 pension and a $24,000 annual benefit adds half the benefit, $12,000 to the pension. That is $42,000 of provisional income before you count a dime of interest. She is well past the $34,000 line, so up to 85% of her benefit can be taxed. She did nothing extravagant. A middle-class pension and an average check carried her there on their own. That is how ordinary these numbers are. Here's what almost nobody tells you about these bands. The percentages are ceilings, not flat rates. The 85% figure is the maximum share of your benefit. That can be taxed, not a tax rate itself. Your actual bill depends on your regular bracket on top of that. So the tiers decide how much of the benefit enters the taxable pile. Your ordinary rates then decide the damage. Two separate steps, and people blur them into one scary number. Hold that thought, because it becomes your defense later. So that is what provisional income is and how the tiers work. Now the real question, why do I call it a trap and not just a rule? The trap is in the dates. The 50% tier came from the 1983 Social Security amendments, and it took effect in 1984. The 85% tier was added by a 1993 law and took effect in 1994. Write those years on a wall. 1984 and 1994. Since then, the thresholds have not moved 1 inch. Not once. The $25,000 line is the same $25,000 it was when the first cell phones weighed 2 pounds. The $32,000 and $44,000 lines for couples have been frozen since 1993. A number set during one presidency is still quietly working during another, decades later, unchanged. Now think about what did not stay frozen. Wages went up. Benefits went up because Social Security has cost of living adjustments baked in. Prices went up. Every year the world inflates a little, your benefit checks inflate a little too, keep pace, and the frozen lines just sit there. The gap closes on its own. You do not have to do anything. You do not have to earn more in real terms. The line comes to you. It is a tide rising against a seawall that nobody ever raised. Compare it to a number that does move. The standard deduction is indexed to inflation, and you can watch it climb. For a single filer, it rose from $15,150 in 2025 to $16,100 in 2026. Small step, but it is a step every single year in your favor. That is what indexing does. It keeps a threshold roughly fair as prices rise. The provisional income lines get none of that. Same law, same government, one number rises and the other stays nailed to the floor. It is not one thing that makes this a trap. It is the contrast. One dial is allowed to breathe, and the other is welded shut. The result has a name that fiscal wonks love. Bracket creep by neglect. Nobody voted to tax more retirees this year. No new law passed. The reach expands anyway. Quietly. Through pure inaction. When the 85% tier arrived in 1994, a small slice of beneficiaries paid tax on their benefits. Today, roughly half of all Social Security beneficiaries pay some federal tax on what they receive. And that share keeps climbing. Half. Let that land for a moment. A rule sold as hitting only higher income retirees now touches 1 in every 2. The line did not get stricter. The people just drifted across it. And drift is the right word because it feels like nothing while it happens. There is no letter in the mail. There is no alarm. 1 year you are comfortably under the threshold. A cost of living bump lands, your provisional income ticks up, and you slide over. The switch flips, your tax bill jumps, and it was not because you did anything wrong. It was because a number from the Reagan era refused to age. The scary part is not the year it hits you. The scary part is that it was always going to. So the thresholds are frozen, the tide is rising, and more people cross every year. What can you actually do standing on this beach? Quite a lot, as it turns out, because provisional income is a number you can steer. Start with the first lever, which is managing provisional income itself. Remember the formula. It is adjusted gross income plus tax-exempt interest plus half your benefits. 2 of those 3 pieces are things you influence with timing. The money you pull from a traditional IRA or 401k lands in your adjusted gross income and feeds the formula. So the order and the size of your withdrawals directly move the needle. Pull a huge distribution in 1 year and you can vault yourself over the line. Spread it out and you might stay under. You are not stuck. You are holding the dial. A driver who knows where the speed camera is can lift off the gas before it, not after. Here is the light aside on that municipal bond. People buy tax-free bonds in retirement thinking they have outsmarted the system. The interest really is free of regular income tax. But it still counts in provisional income, so it can quietly push your benefits into the taxable zone. The tax you dodged on the bond shows up wearing a different coat. Something to check before you assume tax-exempt means tax-invisible. The second lever is the Roth conversion, and this is the big one. Money in a traditional IRA is a tax bill you have not paid yet. Money in a Roth is already paid, and Roth withdrawals do not count in provisional income at all. That last part is the magic. A Roth distribution does not land in your adjusted gross income, so it does not push you toward the $44,000 line. Convert some traditional money to Roth in your lower income years, pay the tax now while your rate is low, and you shrink the pile that will haunt you later. You are choosing to settle the tax on your terms instead of the codes. It is paying for the umbrella on a sunny day when it is cheap and calm. The best window for that move is often the quiet years, and the brief spells it out. Many advisors point to the early to mid-60s. After you stop working but before Social Security and required distributions switch on, those are the gap years, when your income can be unusually low. Convert in that valley and the tax cost is small. Wait, and required minimum distributions arrive to fill the valley for you. Those now begin at age 73 under the Secure 2. Zero rules, and they rise to 75 in 2033. Once they hit, they stack on top of your benefits and can shove you over every frozen line at once. The valley does not last. Use it while it is there. That leads to the third lever, which is withdrawal timing and sequence. It is not just how much you take. It is the order you turn on each income source. A common default is to claim Social Security early. Leave the traditional accounts untouched to grow and feel clever about it. Then the required distributions arrive years later, large and mandatory, right on top of a benefit that is now fully exposed. It is the wrong order, and it is expensive. The smarter path many advisors describe flips it. Spend from taxable brokerage money first, convert, or draw down traditional accounts during the low years, and delay Social Security towards 70 for a larger, partly shielded benefit. Same accounts, same dollars, sequenced to keep provisional income low when it matters. The size of the nest egg matters less than the order you unlock it. There is a mini payoff hiding in delaying Social Security, by the way. Waiting past full retirement age earns delayed credits of 8% per year up to 70. Wait all the way to 70 and your benefit reaches 124% of the full retirement age amount. The monthly check at 70 runs about 77% higher than the one you would have taken at 62. That is a bigger check later and fewer years of it landing in the taxable pile early. You get more benefit and less exposure at the same time. Two birds. One caution, so this does not sound too clean. Delaying is not free money for everyone. There are break-even ages, the point where the larger delayed check finally overtakes the smaller. Early one you skipped, claiming at 62 versus 70, breaks even somewhere, around age 80 or 81. Live well past that, and delay wins clearly. If your health or family history points the other way, the math can tilt. This is a lever, not a law. Pull it when your own situation says pull it. The fourth lever is new, and it is partial relief, not rescue. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, signed in July 2025, created an extra deduction for seniors. It is $6,000 per individual age 65 or older, and $12,000 for a married couple if both spouses are 65 or older. It stacks on top of whatever you already take, standard deduction or itemized, as a separate bonus. For some lower and middle income seniors, that extra deduction erases the tax they would have owed on their benefits entirely. It was promoted as delivering no tax on Social Security. Read the fine print instead. It does not repeal a single one of those provisional income rules. It lowers taxable income, which can cancel the bill for some people and does nothing for others. And it comes with strings. It runs for tax years 2025 through 2028 only, then it expires. It phases out as income rises, starting at $75,000 for a single filer and $150,000 for a couple, and it vanishes completely at $175,000 single or $250,000 joint. You must be 65 by year end, have a valid Social Security number, and not be someone's dependent. The angle worth knowing is that almost nobody is claiming it well. It is brand new, buried in a giant bill, easy to miss on a return, and it phases out silently. Many eligible seniors will leave it on the table in its first filing season simply because they never heard of it. A discount only counts if you actually hand over the coupon. Now, the honest part, because I am not here to scare you past the facts, the 85% figure is a ceiling, and that matters. You are never taxed on 100% of your Social Security benefit. No matter how high your income climbs, at least 15% of that benefit stays off the taxable pile permanently. The law was written that way on purpose. So the worst case is bad, not total. 15 cents of every benefit dollar are always yours. And on the other end, plenty of retirees pay nothing at all. If your provisional income sits below the first threshold, $25,000 single or $32,000 joint, none of your benefit is taxed. Zero. Millions of lower income retirees live entirely under that line and never think about any of this correctly. This is not a doomsday rule that flattens everyone. It is a graduated one. The bands rise with income, the low end pays nothing, the high end tops out at 85%, and most people land somewhere on the slope between. Let's be honest, if the whole benefit were taxable, the outrage would have forced a fix decades ago. The 85% cap is part of why the frozen lines have survived so long. It hurts just enough to matter and not quite enough to riot. So keep both facts in your head at once. The thresholds are unfair because they are frozen. And the tax itself is capped and graduated, so it is a leak, not a flood. You plan around a leak. You do not panic over it. The goal is never to feel doomed. The goal is to know which dollars trip the wire so you can decide when to send them across and when to hold them back. That is a plan, and a plan beats a surprise every year of your life. Which brings us to the twist, the piece I promised would tie it all together. Step back from the formula and the tiers and the levers, and look at the shape of the thing. This rule does not tax you because you got richer. Read that again. It taxes you because a number from 1984 never moved. Your real buying power can be flat or even shrinking, and the tax still finds you because the line is standing still while the whole world drifts past it. That is the entire mechanism. Not your success, it's inertia. Here is the quotable version. You did not rise into this tax. The tax stood still, and time carried you into it. That is the difference between a rule that targets wealth and a rule that just refuses to age. One is a policy. The other is a fossil that still bites. And once you see that shape, you see it everywhere in the tax code. Any threshold that is not indexed to inflation is a slow-motion tax increase that nobody has to vote for. It works in the dark. It expands its reach every year through pure neglect, and it counts on you never noticing the mechanism. The frozen provisional income lines are the clearest example, but they are not the only one. The lesson is bigger than Social Security. Watch which numbers move and which numbers are nailed down, because the nailed down ones are quietly reaching for you. A frozen line is not neutral. Standing still, in a world that inflates, is the same as slowly closing in. Picture two retirees 10 years apart. The first one crosses the $44,000 line in a year when few of her neighbors do, and she grumbles and pays. 10 years later, the second one crosses the very same line, the exact same $44,000, except now half his friends are over it too. The line never moved between them. They did. One number from 1993 stood perfectly still while an entire decade of cost of living bumps floated both of them across it. Neither got richer in any way that mattered. They just aged into a threshold that refused to. That is the whole story, the same one I started with. A line drawn decades ago never moved, and the world moved past it, and it is still quietly taxing people who thought they were done paying. If this made the frozen line make sense, do the free thing. Like it, share it with someone near retirement, and subscribe for the next one.